Welcome to Emergency Call Taking. In this short lecture, we are going to explore how to use guide cards and call algorithms to process emergency calls. If you've ever wondered how a dispatcher or 911 call taker takes a call, how they deal with these stressful situations, how they get through each call, it's not by sheer will or them making up questions or deciding what type of answers and pre-arrival instructions will be helpful. It's all based on preordained information, questions, and protocols that are contained in the guide cards. So you have at the back of your APCO textbook a set of guide cards, and they will, if everybody wants to turn there right now, look like this. Now, I have sent you in the course materials here a couple of different files. One of them is called the All Callers Interrogation Card, or All Callers and Medical Card. It looks like this. And it contains the information for the All Callers card on the top. It's kind of a double card. So the All Callers card is on the top, and the bottom has instructions for a medical card. So it's kind of two cards in one here. If you wanted to pretend almost like as if it was folded, you could pretend that you have an All Callers card and a separate medical card. Your call cards that come in your textbook are not by any means a complete set. How it works is when you take your specific courses for police, fire, and ambulance, you're going to have specific call cards with all the information for that. But because this is sort of an overview course, they just give you a sampling of cards. So in your textbook, you'll notice that most of the cards are police related. And then the very last card, the last piece of paper, has 3 cards on it. And they are brush fire, structure fire, and vehicle fire. So they're sort of the entry to fire cards. And then this one piece of paper that I gave you to print out has the medical card on it and the All Callers card. So you need to print this piece of paper out and put it into your card index inside your textbook in front of, that's not it, but in front of the first card that's there. So if you go to the back of your textbook and you work your way through your pages, it says guide cards at the top. You're going to place that All Callers card right here in front of it. And that is because your All Callers card is a card that we start on for every single call. So every single call, that's why it's called All Callers, because it's for all callers, starts with these questions. So the phone rings, ring, 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 and you would answer it and you would say, question number 1 on here says, 911, where is your emergency? And then it says repeat back to caller, because you're going to repeat back to caller. Then it gives you a couple of other questions that have to do with, tell me exactly what happened, what is the phone number you're calling from, and yada, yada, yada. And from there, you would go on to the specific card, guide card, that relates to the problem that you've discovered by asking those all caller questions. So after you go through your all callers card, then you flip to the right card that relates to the specific problem type or the nature of the call. And then you're going to process that call, the questions, the pre-arrival instructions on that card. And then you're going to end the call politely and positively by saying, we have help started for you. Please call back if anything changes before they arrive. And just so you know, we don't ever tell people that we have help on the way. We don't give ETAs because 911 dispatching is a very fluid environment and vehicles can sometimes go out of service on the way to calls. Sometimes they're reassigned to higher priority calls. And so we don't want to mislead people by ending a call by saying, help is on the way, they should be there in 5 minutes. So a sort of nondescript way to tell them that you have begun the call for them is to say, we have help started for you, because that's a very broad sort of act. So helping start a call for them could mean just putting the call into the system, could mean sending it to the dispatcher. So we have help started for you is just sort of a broad way to let them know that you're acting on their call. And then you're going to say, please call back if anything changes before they arrive. Because we do need to know in the case of medical calls, is the condition of the patient worsening, because that might require different first aid instructions, might change the priority of the call. In the case of police, did maybe an assailant return to the scene, because that's going to change the call from being just occurred to in process, and is someone in danger at that call, requiring immediate emergent assistance, and so on and so forth. So we do need to remind them to call back if anything does change before they arrive. So all calls start with the all callers interrogation card. Some different agencies call this different words, but APCO's word for it is the all callers card or all callers interrogation card. And I think that's a really great name because it is for all callers. Every call that comes in, they're going to be asked these questions on this all callers card, and then we move on to different cards, different scenarios, depending on what they have going on. But generally, we all start on this all callers card. So right out of the gates, it tells you that you answer the phone, 911, where is your emergency? So generally in 911 dispatch, you would answer a phone, an emergency 911 line, with the agency name, so you identify your agency, and then you say, where is your emergency? So by identifying the agency, it depends where you work and what you're doing, but when I worked for Toronto EMS, we would answer the phone, Toronto Ambulance, and because they're extra cool, they used to say, where do you need us? But generally speaking, you say, where is the emergency? But Toronto Ambulance. When I worked at the fire department, it was Oshawa Fire. When I worked for EMS in Durham, we didn't say EMS, we said ambulance, where is your emergency? Because a lot of people are confused by the word or the term EMS or emergency medical dispatch. They get thrown off by EMS or emergency medical services or emergency medical dispatch. They don't really understand it. There's confusing ideas about what it is. So if you just answer ambulance, people know what an ambulance is. That's what they want. That's what they're calling for. So most EMS service providers call them or answer the phone with ambulance, where is your emergency? So we say the agency name, and then following that we say, where is your emergency? And your APCO textbook covers this a lot this week because where is the most important piece of information you have to get from a caller. And that's why they embed it right into the actual way you answer the phone. It's that important. And I'll tell you why. If a caller calls in and they are very lightheaded and they're going to pass out and they only have 10 seconds before they faint on the phone, if they tell you, if you were to say 911, what is your emergency? And they said, I feel really faint, like I'm going to pass out. Clunk. And you have no idea how to help them or where they are. You just know that they're unconscious on the other end of the phone. If the caller says, I'm at 123 Main Street, and then they clunk over and you don't know what's happened to them, you don't know that they felt faint, you can still send help to 123 Main Street. You just don't know what help to send, but you at least know where they are. We call those calls 911 unknowns in emergency services. So when we get calls where somebody dials 911 and they hang up, or someone dials 911 and maybe they get a few words out, but they can't identify exactly the nature of their problem, we send a police unit, a fire unit, and an ambulance unit to all of those calls. So if you were ever a kid that dialed 911 in error and a dispatcher called you back and either you said, I was just playing with the phone, or your mom answered it and got you in big trouble, that's why. And some of you maybe didn't answer the phone when it rang back, and then you had a police, fire, and ambulance unit all show up at your house. So we answer the phone, 911, where is your emergency? And when we do mock calls for this, we actually say, even in professional centers, ring, 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 911, where is your emergency? And that's how you answer the phone. Now, not all agencies do this next part, but APCO recommends it, and I highly recommend it, even if your agency doesn't actually have it as a protocol, just as a best practice, repeat the address back to the caller. People calling for emergency situations are, very distracted. They're very upset. Sometimes they say the number of their house wrong. Sometimes they will give you their home address because they're panicking and they're actually at their grandma's house. There are all sorts of situations where maybe you've heard the wrong street name. It's something similar. I have caught so many wrong addresses by repeating the address back to the caller. So you can do it really quickly. You don't want to waste time on it, but you just say, ring, 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 911, where is your emergency? The person says 123 Main Street, and you say, okay, that's 123 Main Street. Tell me exactly what happened. It takes 1 second to say it really quickly back to them, and it can cover and solve a lot of problems. So I would always, as a best practice, repeat the address back to the caller. Then you follow up with question number 2, which is tell me exactly what happened. You give them an opportunity to tell you what happened. Then number 3 is you say, what is the phone number you were calling from? You take the phone number. Best practice is to also repeat the phone number back to them. And then you say, what is your name? And you document their name. And those are sort of the list of pieces of information in order that we need them, from highest ranking priority to lowest. So the person's name is not a very high priority at all. Sometimes with police calls, it's very helpful because we can run background checks or CPIC checks on somebody. Sometimes it's helpful with ambulance because we can check and see somebody's history. But generally speaking, the names of the callers are very, very low priority in emergency dispatch as a whole. So you've done your all callers card, you've got your information. Now, based on this information, you're going to choose the most appropriate guide card. So based on whatever they told you. Now, if the person just said something really quickly, so let's say you said, 911, where's your emergency? I'm at 123 Main Street. Tell me exactly what happened. My dad's arm is bleeding. Okay, what is the phone number that you're calling from? What is your name? And then I have to go to the card, and his arm's bleeding. So that's a traumatic medical injury. But I kind of want to know what the mechanism of injury is. So when people tell you the small result of an injury, you need to know how it happened. And we call it mechanism of injury, or how that injury happened. And then I would, at that point, it's not on a card, but I need to know, when I said, tell me exactly what happened, I need to elaborate on that. And I would say, okay, so I'm confirming that you said your dad's arm is bleeding. How did that happen? Well, he fell off the roof of our 3-story home. Okay, well, that's a different kind of injury. I'm glad I asked. So this is what happens. People focus on very small details of their emergency without gleaning the larger picture. So sometimes you have to help pull them back a bit, and it's going to change your response. Your dad's arm is bleeding. How did that happen? Well, he was shot. There was a man that robbed us here. That's a totally different kind of call. Again, we need to pull them back a little bit and get a few more details before we can accurately find the most appropriate guide card to go to. So we're going to say, how did that happen? And she's going to tell me that he fell from the roof and his arm's bleeding. Okay, so I'm going to go to the appropriate guide card. Once we have our information, or enough information to select the most appropriate guide card, we will proceed to that guide card. So your very first guide card is at the bottom of your all caller card I gave you, and it is your medical guide card. In real life, medical emergency calls have probably 30 separate guide cards relating to all these different problem types. I'm giving you one card for all of the medical calls. So it's just a very generic card. It's got a couple of basic questions on there, and you can use those just as a general idea for medical calls when we're pretending to do medical calls. Again, there's 3 fire cards in the back, and then there is probably about 20 different police cards. Again, not the entire set. It's not the entire gamut of police calls. So you need to be aware of what cards are in there. First of all, as a dispatcher or call taker, you need to know what cards are here so you can go to the right one. So you don't have to memorize what the cards are, but it's a good idea to go through them all a few times and make sure you know what you have as an option. Oh, there's an alarm card. Oh, there's a vandalism card. So just being aware of what cards you can go to. You'll also need to do this when you're practicing and for your group assignment, because you're going to be giving people calls. And if you pretend to do a call for some random event that there is no card here for, that's not going to work. In your fire and ambulance and police classes, you can absolutely pick any kind of emergency you want because that's real life. But in this situation, you don't have the real life cards, so you can't really make every type of real life call. But there's a lot in here. There's, I'm looking at stolen vehicle, shooting, stabbing, officer down, prowlers. Like, there's car accidents, home invasions. There's lots of cards here. So you're going to use the cards that you have here as a guide to figure out what types of calls you're going to be giving each other when you pretend to do calls. So on your guide card, you flip to the right guide card, and you're going to ask all the questions. So every guide card is split up into general questions, and then dispatcher actions and pre-arrival instructions. So these cards work the same in fire, and they also work the same in ambulance. So once you learn how to use these cards once, you get to reuse that skill for the next 3 courses. So you're going to ask all of the general question cards. That changes a little bit when you move into fire and ambulance. Sometimes you can read them until you get a trigger, but for our purposes right now, just read all the questions. And you're probably thinking, that's a lot of questions. Well, if you've ever dialed 911, you know they do ask a lot of questions, and this is why. We're trying to ascertain as much information as we can, and these questions are based on years and years of experience and situation, and also liability to make sure that we are covering safety for everyone involved as well. So once you're done all your questions, then you're going to give pre-arrival instructions. Now, pre-arrival instructions means pre-arrival. So what are you going to tell people to do before an ambulance or a police officer or a fire truck arrives? So for ambulance, it tends to be first aid and CPR instructions. For fire departments, it often tends to be evacuation, run away and be safe. And for police, it tends to be sort of shelter in place in a safe area and just wait it out for police to arrive. So that's just a really broad scope. And normally what you'll have under these pre-arrival instructions is detailed, very detailed notes about your problem type. So if somebody calls in and they're having a heart attack, you give them one set of first aid instructions. And if somebody is calling in because they're in labor and delivering a baby, that's another set of instructions. So the catch, though, with your guide cards here is that they don't actually have anything in the pre-arrival section. So they've been all left blank, and that's because different agencies hire lawyers and doctors and a variety of experts to come up with their pre-arrival instructions, and I don't think that APCO felt legally comfortable giving you that information. So you go through the guide cards, and when we're doing for the sake of our mock calls, you can just, there's nothing in there for the pre-arrival, so you don't have to give any pre-arrival instructions. Now, there is one thing you do have to do to close the call, though. So in order to end the call, you've asked your questions, you've given your pre-arrival instructions, which in our case right now for this specific card set is none, and then you're going to end the call. So before you hang up with someone, you're going to say, "We have help started for you. Please call back if anything changes before they arrive." And that's how you hang up a call. A lot of new dispatchers find it really awkward. They get through all the technical pieces of the call, and they get to the end and they're like, okay, bye. And it's kind of weird that take care, and you're not sure how to end the call. So if you change how your tone and intonation is on this phrase, it sounds like you're ending the call. "Okay, we have help started for you. Please call back if anything changes before they arrive." Click. And that's how you end the call. That's it. So you're going to use that line for every one of your calls at the end. For our purposes, it might change a little bit when you go into your fire, police, and EMD courses. But for our sake, again, this is your intro course. We're trying to keep things kind of light and broad. So "We have help started for you. Please call back if anything changes before they arrive." That's it. Now, going back again, I'd just like to really emphasize, you need to print out the all callers card that I have created for you and put it into the front of your guide cards. So every time that you get a 911 call in our mock calls, you open up to this card, read these first 4 questions, and then go to the right guide card. And it might be this medical one here if it's medical, or it could be the police or fire ones in your textbook. If you don't have a printer, find a piece of paper and handwrite it out. I mean, it's not that long, and it might help you remember everything. So we're going to use this for our group assignment. We're going to use this for other practice calls throughout the semester, but this is what you're going to be using to take your calls. This all callers card that you're going to print or handwrite out and put into your book. And then, if you want to, we don't have to for the group assignment, but if we were in class, I usually give you one of these. So I've included this in your in the content section here, and it's called a call card. And it's basically a card that has a couple of boxes on it for date, address, time, agency, call type details. And if we were in class right now, you would be handwriting all that information into here while you get the information. So if you want to print them off and do that, you can. If you want to pull it up, I've included it as a Word document so you can edit it. So if you want to pull it up as a Word document and type out your stuff while you take calls, that's also really cool. And then you'll get a copy of that, or you'll have a copy of that. Now, when we go into our specific courses like fire, police, and ambulance, you're going to be using Versaterm software likely. So we will be in the lab using that Versaterm software, and you can type it up there. But because this is, again, just the introductory course, we're just getting used to answering the phone the right way, going through the all-caller card, and then proceeding to the right guide card. And that's kind of our target in this course. Now, you have your group assignment set up. Your group assignment is found in the Assignments tab, and it's also a video assignment is how it's set up. So video assignment is located under our course activities, but there is also a link to it in Assignment 1 in the assignments. I've triple linked everything, so you should be able to get everywhere no problem. There are a couple of people who have never signed into the virtual world classroom, and so they aren't able to link up and join a group. I did send an email out a couple days ago explaining that you needed to just show up and enter the room so that I could add you to a group. But for those of you that didn't have that done, that's okay. But you won't be able to use the video assignment feature in your calls. So for you, you can contact me and I can work something else out for you. For everyone else, it's going to be a video assignment.